The lecture hall was quiet, except for the deep voice of Commander Voss. He stood at the front of the room, his forearms moving as he pointed at the holographic display behind him. 200 cadets sat in their seats, their eyes fixed on the battle, formations floating in the air. Kang Do-wan sat in the far corner of the back row. Seat 4-3. It was the most forgotten seat in the entire hall. No one looked at the back row. No one cared about the back row. And that was exactly why Do-wan liked it. He was human. One of only 7 humans in a class of 200 aliens. The Thulians sat in the front with their blue skin and proud faces. The Kaleri, tall and four-armed like Commander Voss, filled the middle rows. The Sylvans, thin and pale with silver eyes, scattered themselves throughout. And the humans sat wherever they could find space, trying not to be noticed. Do-wan wrote notes on his tablet. His handwriting was small and neat. He never raised his hand. He never spoke in class. He arrived early, sat down, and left when the lecture ended. Most of his classmates did not even know his name. To them, he was just a quiet human in the corner. Commander Voss was explaining a famous battle. When the doors opened, everyone turned to look. 2 officers walked into the hall. They wore the black and gold uniforms of the Union High Command. One of them carried a small velvet case in his hands. Their boots clicked against the floor as they walked toward Commander Voss. The commander stopped, speaking. His 4 eyes narrowed with confusion. "Can I help you?" he asked. The first officer, a tall Kalari female, nodded. "Forgive the interruption, Commander. We are here on official business from the Admiralty." Whispers spread through the hall. The Admiralty never visited the Academy. They controlled the entire military of the Galactic Union. They did not deliver messages in person. They sent communications through screens like everyone else. "What business?" Commander Voss asked. The second officer, an older human male with gray hair, stepped forward. He opened the velvet case. Inside, resting on red fabric, was a medal. It was shaped like a star with 8 points. The medal was pure white, and it glowed softly with an inner light. Do-wan's breath stopped. He knew that medal. Every cadet in the galaxy knew that medal. It was the Star of Valor, the highest military honor in the entire Galactic Union. In 300 years, fewer than 50 beings had ever received it. Most of them received it after they died. "We are here to present the Star of Valor," the Kalari officer announced. Her voice was loud and clear. "As authorized by the Union Admiralty and declassified under Special Order 773. The whispers became louder. Cadets looked at each other with wide eyes. "A Star of Valor? Here? Now?" The human officer read from a small screen in his hand. "The Star of Valor is awarded to the unknown cadet in Seat 43A for actions performed under File Omega-7, previously classified top secret, now released for public record." Silence. Complete silence. Every head in the room turned. Every eye looked toward the back corner. Toward Seat 43, toward Do-wan. He did not move. He could not move. His body felt like stone. His heart beat so hard he could hear it in his ears. Commander Voss looked at his tablet. He checked the seating chart. "Seat 43A, he said slowly. "That seat is registered to Cadet Kang Do-wan, human, Earth origin." He looked up at the officers. "There must be a mistake. I have no record of this cadet performing any notable action." "There is no mistake," the human officer said. The file was classified at the highest level. Even his instructors were not informed. But the Admiralty has decided that the truth should be known. The Kalari officer looked directly at Do-wan. "Cadet Kang Do-wan, please stand." Do-wan's legs felt weak, but he stood. Every eye in the room was on him. He could feel them staring. The Thulians in the front row looked confused and angry. The Sylvans looked curious. His fellow humans looked shocked. He walked down the steps toward the front of the hall. Each step felt like 1,000 miles. The room was so quiet, he could hear his own breathing. When he reached the officers, they both stood straight and saluted him. A Kalari officer and a human officer, saluting a cadet. This never happened. This was not possible. The human officer opened the case and lifted the medal. He pinned it to Do-hwan's chest. The medal was warm against his uniform. Cadet Kang Do-hwan, the officer said softly, so only Do-hwan could hear. The Admiralty finally declassified its son. The universe deserves to know what you did on Hollow Moon Keth 4. Do-hwan closed his eyes. His hands trembled at his sides. I never wanted them to know, he whispered. The officer placed a hand on his shoulder. Heroes rarely do. The Kalari officer turned to face the class. Cadets of the Galactic Union Military Academy. You sit in the presence of a true hero. The details of his actions will be released to all Union worlds within the hour. Until then, show respect. She saluted Do-hwan one more time. Then both officers turned and walked out of the hall. Commander Voss stared at Do-hwan. The metal on his chest glowed softly. The silence in the room was heavy, thick, and full of questions. In the front row, a Thulian cadet named Ren leaned toward his friend. A human? He whispered, his voice dripping with disbelief. Receiving a Star of Valor? Impossible. But the medal was real. The officers were real. And the quiet human from seat 4-3 stood at the front of the room, his face pale and his eyes distant, carrying a secret that the entire galaxy was about to learn. Commander Voss cleared his throat. Class dismissed, he said quietly. No one moved. They all just stared at the boy with the star on his chest. The boy who had been invisible until today. The boy who looked like he wished he still was. The cadets filed out of the lecture hall slowly. They moved in small groups, whispering to each other, stealing glances at the human who still stood at the front of the room. The Do-hwan had not moved since the officers left. The metal on his chest felt heavier than anything he had ever carried. Commander Voss approached him carefully. The tall Kalari looked down at the young human with new eyes. Cadet Kang, he said quietly. I have taught at this academy for 40 years. I have never seen this happen before. Do-hwan said nothing. Whatever you did, the commander continued, it must have been extraordinary. It was a long time ago, Do-hwan finally said. His voice was flat and tired. I just want to go back to my seat. Commander Voss nodded slowly. Of course, but I suspect your seat will feel different from now on. Do-hwan walked toward the door. The few cadets still in the hall moved aside as he passed. They looked at him like he was a stranger, like he was something they had never seen before. In a way, he was. Outside the lecture hall, the corridors were full of noise. News traveled fast in the academy. Students from other classes gathered in groups, talking loudly about the human who received the Star of Valor. Some looked curious. Some looked impressed. Many looked doubtful. Ren, a Thulian from the front row, stood with his friends near the water station. When Do-hwan walked past, Ren stepped in front of him. You, Ren said. His blue skin was darker around his cheeks, a sign of anger and Thulians. There has to be a mistake. Humans do not receive stars of valor. Your species has been part of the Union for less than a century. You are young. You are weak. You die from things that would not even hurt a Thulian child. Do-hwan looked at Ren calmly. Move, he said. I want to know what trick you played, Ren continued. What lie you told the Admiralty. Because there is no way a human did something worthy of that medal. I said move. Ren laughed. Oh, what? You will fight me? You would break your fragile human bones on my Ren. A soft voice cut through the air. A Sylvan girl stepped forward. Her silver eyes were fixed on the Thulian. Her name was Tira, and she rarely spoke in class. But when she did, people listened. Leave him alone. Ren looked at her with surprise. Why do you care about this human? Because I have manners, Tira said coldly. Something you clearly lack. Ren's jaw tightened, but he stepped aside. Do-hwan walked past him without another word. Tira caught up to him. Are you all right? She asked. I am fine. You do not look fine. Do-hwan stopped walking. He turned to look at the Sylvan girl. I did not ask for this. I did not want this. I just wanted to finish my training and disappear into some quiet corner of the galaxy. That is all I ever wanted. Tira studied his face. Whatever you did, it must have been something important. The Admiralty does not give that medal to just anyone. I know, Do-hwan said quietly. That is the problem. He walked away before she could say anything else. In another part of the station, a young man named Park Jung-ho sat in his private quarters. He was the son of Earth's ambassador to the Galactic Union. Unlike most human cadets, he had grown up surrounded by aliens. He knew their languages, their customs, their politics. And he knew that something very strange had just happened. Junho typed on his console. He used his father's security codes to access military records. He searched for file Omega-7. The screen flashed red. Access denied. Classified. Recipient only. He tried again with higher clearance. Access denied. Event. Hollow Moon Incident. Details. Restricted. Junho leaned back in his chair. The Hollow Moon Incident. He had heard that name before. 2 years ago, there was an accident at a mining colony. A reactor almost exploded. Thousands of colonists almost died. But somehow, they were saved. The details were never released. And now, a quiet human cadet in his own class had received the highest honor in the galaxy for something connected to that incident. Junho smiled slowly. Who are you, Kang Do-hwan? He whispered. On the observation deck at the top of the station, Do-hwan stood alone. The stars stretched out before him, millions of tiny lights in the endless black. He had come here many times before, always alone, always at night. It was the only place where he could breathe. The door opened behind him. He did not turn around. He already knew who it was. Yoon-hana walked up beside him. She was a pilot cadet in a different division. She had short black hair and kind eyes. She was also the only person in the galaxy who truly knew him. I heard what happened, she said softly. Everyone heard what happened. Are you okay? Do-hwan laughed, but there was no humor in it. They were not supposed to find out. Ever. That was the deal. I stay quiet. They keep it classified, and everyone forgets. I never forgot, Hana said. You were there. Yes, I was there. She moved closer to him. I saw what you did. I saw you walk into that fire when everyone else ran away. Do-hwan's hands gripped the railing. His knuckles turned white. I did what I had to do. You did more than that. He turned to look at her. His eyes were wet. There were children in there, Hana. Little kids. Crying for their parents. Burning alive while the officers calculated evacuation times and acceptable losses. His voice cracked. I could not sit on that ship and watch them die. I could not. Hana took his hand. It was trembling. I know, she said. I know. Do-hwan pulled the medal from his chest and looked at it. The inscription on the back was small, but he knew the words by heart. For the 6,000 who lived because one refused to leave. I dream about it every night, he whispered. The screaming. The heat. The moment when I thought I would die in there. He closed his eyes. And now everyone will know. Everyone will look at me and see a hero. But I do not feel like a hero. I feel like a broken thing pretending to be whole. Hana squeezed his hand. You are not broken. You are the bravest person I have ever known. Outside the window, the stars continued to shine, cold and distant. And somewhere in the galaxy, the story of Kang Do-won was spreading from world to world, from species to species, preparing to change everything. But in that moment, he was just a boy holding a medal he never wanted, standing next to the only friend who understood, trying very hard not to fall apart. 2 years before the medal, before the whispers, before Seat 43A, Kang Do-won was just an 18-year-old cadet on his first training mission. The supply ship, Horizon, carried 30 cadets through the outer systems. It was supposed to be simple. Deliver supplies to 3 colonies. Return to the academy. Write a report. Get a grade. But space was never simple. The distress signal came at midnight, ship time. Red lights flashed through the corridors. Alarms screamed. Every cadet woke from their sleep and ran to the bridge. Captain Yo stood at the center console, his face gray with worry. He was human, one of the few human captains in the Union fleet. On the main screen, a moon hung in space. Hollow Moon Keth 4, a mining colony. The reactor is failing, Captain Yo announced. Radiation levels are rising. They have 6 hours before the core melts down. A Calari officer checked the readings. There are 6,000 colonists on that moon, mostly Thulian and Sylvan families. The miners and their children. How long until Union rescue ships arrive? Someone asked. 48 hours. The room went silent. 48 hours. The colonists had 6. Do-won stood at the back of the bridge. Beside him, Yoon-hana gripped his arm tightly. They were both cadets. They had no rank. They had no power. They could only watch. Can we evacuate them ourselves? A Thulian officer asked. Captain Yo shook his head. The radiation zone is too hot. Our shuttles cannot enter without killing the pilots. Even our shielded pods would fry within minutes. So we wait? The Thulian's voice was angry. We wait while 6,000 people die? We have no choice. The captain's voice was heavy. I have already sent emergency signals. We stay at safe distance. We wait for the rescue fleet. We do what we can. The Thulian slammed his fist against the wall. What we can? We can do nothing. You are telling me to sit here and count the hours until children burn alive. What would you have me do? Captain Yo shouted back. Send my crew to their deaths? Throw away more lives? Do-won closed his eyes. He could hear the blood rushing in his ears. He thought about the 6,000 people on that moon. The families. The children. Waiting for help that would come too late. And then he remembered something. He stepped forward. Captain. Everyone turned to look at him. A cadet. A teenager. Speaking without permission. What is it? Captain Yo asked impatiently. Humans can survive higher radiation than most species, Do-won said. His voice was quiet but steady. I read a study. We evolved under a yellow sun. Our cells can repair radiation damage faster. A dose that would kill a Thulian in an hour would take 3 times longer to kill a human. The Calari officer checked his data. He is correct. Human radiation tolerance is approximately 300% higher than Union average. Captain Yo stared at Do-won. What are you suggesting? The reactor needs manual reset. Someone has to go inside and reroute the coolant systems. The computers are fried from the radiation. It has to be done by hand. Do-won swallowed hard. I can do it. You would die, the captain said flatly. Maybe, but if I can hold on long enough to restart the coolant, the meltdown will be delayed. That could give you enough time to evacuate everyone. I cannot allow this. You are a cadet. Those are children down there. Do-won's voice cracked. I cannot sit here and watch them die while I do nothing. I will not. Hana grabbed his arm. Do-won, No. This is suicide. He turned to look at her. His eyes were calm, almost peaceful. Anna, if I do nothing, I will never forgive myself. I will spend the rest of my life seeing their faces in my dreams. That is worse than dying. Please, she whispered. Tears ran down her face. Please, do not go. Do-hwan touched her cheek gently. Take care of yourself. If I do not come back, tell my mother I love her. He walked to the shuttle bay before anyone could stop him. The shuttle was small, barely enough room for one person. Do-hwan climbed inside and sealed the door. Through the window, he could see Hana running toward him, screaming his name. Captain Yo was shouting orders. Alarms were ringing, but Do-hwan was already gone. The flight to Hollow Moon Keth 4 took 20 minutes. The radiation levels climbed higher with every second. By the time he entered the atmosphere, the warning lights in the shuttle were solid red. He landed near the reactor complex. The heat hit him the moment he opened the door. It was like stepping into an oven. The air burned his lungs. His skin began to itch immediately. He ran toward the main building. Dead bodies lay on the ground, workers who had tried to fix the problem and failed. Their skin was red and blistered. Do-hwan tried not to look. Inside the reactor control room, the temperature was even higher. Do-hwan's suit began to melt against his skin. He could feel his body weakening, his cells dying one by one. But he kept moving. The coolant controls were at the far end of the room. Do-hwan reached them and began working. His vision blurred. His hands shook. He made mistakes and had to start again. Twice, he collapsed to the floor. Twice, he forced himself back up. 4 hours. That is how long it took. 4 hours of burning alive from the inside. 4 hours of refusing to quit. 4 hours of telling himself that every second he survived was another second for the colonists. Finally, the coolant systems restarted. The temperature began to drop. The meltdown was delayed. On the horizon, Captain Yo watched the readings change. He did not waste time celebrating. He launched every shuttle, every pod, every escape craft the ship had. They flew into the dying moon and began pulling people out. 6,000 colonists. Thulian Sylvans, a few humans, families, children. They were loaded onto ships and carried to safety while the reactors slowly cooled and in the control room. Kang Do-hwan finally allowed himself to fall. They found him 12 hours later, when the radiation dropped enough for rescue teams to enter. He was lying on the floor, his suit melted to his body, his skin covered in burns, his heart barely beating. He should have been dead. Any other species would have been dead. But humans were stubborn. Humans did not know when to quit. Humans looked at impossible odds and said, I will try anyway. The doctor said he would never fully recover. The radiation had damaged his organs, his bones, his eyes. He would carry the scars forever, but he was alive. And so were 6,000 people who should have died. Captain Yo recommended him for the Star of Valor. The Admiralty agreed but classified the file. They did not want the galaxy to know what one human boy had done. They did not want to explain why a species so young and so fragile had produced someone capable of this. So they buried the story. And Do-hwan returned to the academy, quiet and scarred, sitting in the back row, hoping to be forgotten. But some secrets do not stay buried forever. The auditorium was the largest room in the academy. It could hold 5,000 beings, and today, every seat was filled. Cadets, instructors, officers, and officials sat in rows that stretched from floor to ceiling. Giant screens floated above the stage, broadcasting the event to every world in the Galactic Union. Kang Do-hwan sat in the front row. He had been ordered to attend. He had no choice. Beside him, Yoon-hana held his hand under the seats where no one could see. She had not left his side since the medal ceremony. She knew what was coming, and she knew how much he hated it. Admiral San walked onto the stage. She was human, one of the highest-ranking humans in the Union military. Her uniform was covered with medals, but none as bright as the one on Dawan's chest. "Citizens of the Galactic Union," she began, her voice echoing through the hall. 2 years ago, an incident occurred on Hollow Moon Keth 4. A reactor failure threatened the lives of 6,000 colonists. The official report said that a malfunction was repaired and evacuation was successful. That report was incomplete. She paused. The screens behind her flickered, showing images of the mining colony. Today, by order of the Union Admiralty, the full truth is declassified. File Omega-7 is now public record. The screens changed. They showed a small shuttle flying toward the burning moon. They showed radiation readings that would kill most species in minutes. They showed a single figure walking into the reactor complex. Cadet Kang Do-hwan, aged 18 at the time, volunteered to enter the radiation zone alone. He spent 4 hours inside the reactor core, manually restarting the coolant systems. The doctors who examined him later said he absorbed enough radiation to kill 12 Thulians. He should have died. He did not. Whispers spread through the auditorium. On the screens, medical images appeared. Burns covering a young man's body. Scars that would never heal. Reports listing organ damage, bone weakness, permanent injuries. Because of his actions, Admiral San continued, the meltdown was delayed by 6 hours. During those 6 hours, every colonist on Hollow Moon Keth 4 was evacuated. 6,000 lives were saved. Families were reunited. Children grew up instead of dying in fire. The screens went dark. Then, one by one, people began walking onto the stage. They were survivors. Thulian elders with wrinkled blue skin. Sylvan parents holding their children's hands. A few humans who had worked in the mines. They stood in the line facing the audience, facing Do-hwan. An old Thulian woman stepped forward. Her voice was thin but clear. I was the head nurse at the colony hospital. When the alarm started, we had 300 patients who could not walk. We thought we would all die. But then the evacuation shuttles came, and we had time. Time that should not have existed. Time that one human boy gave us. A Sylvan man spoke next. My daughter was 4 years old. She had a fever that night and could not sleep. I was holding her when the radiation alarm screamed. I thought I would watch her die in my arms. But we were rescued, because someone ran into the fire so we could run out. More voices. More stories. A Thulian grandfather who thought he would never see his grandchildren again. A Sylvan teacher who had evacuated 30 students. A human engineer who had tried to fix the reactor and failed. Who had watched a boy younger than his own son succeed where he could not. And then, a young Sylvan girl walked to the front of the stage. She was perhaps 16 years old, with silver eyes and pale hair. She looked directly at Do-hwan. I was 8 years old, she said. Her voice was soft but steady. The evacuation shuttle was full. There was no room for more children. I was crying because I thought my parents would leave without me. She paused. Her silver eyes filled with tears. A human came to me. His skin was red and burned. His hands were bleeding. He picked me up and carried me to another shuttle, one that had just arrived. He put me inside and smiled at me. He said, "Almost there. You are safe now." Then he collapsed. She looked at Do-hwan. I did not know his name until today. I have thought about him every day for 2 years. I prayed for him every night, hoping he survived. Tira, sitting in the middle rows, suddenly stood up. Her face was pale with shock. She looked at the girl on stage, then at Do-hwan. The girl on stage was her younger sister. "Thank you," the girl said to Do-hwan. "Thank you for saving me." Thank you for saving all of us." The auditorium was silent. No one moved. No one spoke. In the back rows, Ren sat frozen. His arrogant expression was gone. His blue skin had turned pale. He was remembering something. A call from his family 2 years ago. His grandparents lived on a mining colony. There had been an accident. They almost died. But they were saved. Hollow Moon Keth 4. His grandparents had been on Hollow Moon Keth 4. The human he had insulted, the human he had called weak and worthless, had saved his family. Admiral San spoke again. "We classified this file because we were afraid. We did not want the galaxy to know what a human was capable of. We calculated the odds of survival in that reactor. We calculated acceptable losses. We decided that saving 6,000 lives was not worth risking one soldier." She paused. A teenage human cadet disagreed. He did not calculate. He acted. And that terrified us. She looked at Dowan. "Please come to the stage, Cadet Kong." Dowan stood slowly. His legs felt weak. Hannah squeezed his hand one last time before letting go. He walked up the steps and stood facing the crowd of 5,000 beings. "We asked him to speak," Admiral San said. "He refused, but I convinced him to say a few words." Dawan looked at the faces in front of him. Aliens who had ignored him. Aliens who had doubted him. Aliens who were now looking at him with something like wonder. "I am not a hero," he said quietly. The microphones carried his voice through the hall. "I was scared. I was in pain. I thought I was going to die every second I was in that reactor." He took a deep breath. But there were children in there. Families. People who had done nothing wrong. Who were just living their lives. Who deserved to go home at the end of the day. And I could not sit on that ship and watch them burn while I did math about acceptable losses. His voice grew stronger. "I did not do it for a medal. I did not do it for glory. I did it because I could not sleep knowing I did not try. That is all. That is what being human means to me. We do not accept the math. We do not accept that some lives are worth less than others. We try, even when it is stupid, even when it hurts, even when we know we might fail." He looked down at the medal on his chest. "That is not heroism. That is just being human." The auditorium remained silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, someone began to clap. Then another, until 5,000 beings were on their feet, applauding a young man who had walked into fire and refused to let it win. And in the back of the auditorium, Ren the Thulian stood with tears running down his blue cheeks, clapping harder than anyone else, ashamed of every cruel word he had ever spoken. 1 week after the ceremony, the galaxy was different. News channels across 1,000 worlds played the same story. The quiet human cadet, the burning moon, the 6,000 lives. Every species watched. Every species talked. And slowly, opinions that had been fixed for decades began to shift. Humans had always been seen as lesser. They were newcomers to the Galactic Union, a young species with short lifespans and fragile bodies. They died from diseases that other species shrugged off. They burned under radiation that barely bothered a Thulian. They were tolerated, sometimes pitied, rarely respected. But now, people were asking questions they had never asked before. Why did the human run into the fire when everyone else ran away? How did he survive what should have killed him? What made him choose certain death over watching strangers die? The answers were not simple. They were not comfortable. In the halls of the academy, cadets whispered new theories. Maybe humans were not weak. Maybe they were something else entirely. Maybe their short lives made each moment more precious. Maybe their fragile bodies taught them to fight harder for what mattered. On the Thulian homeworld, elders debated in their councils. They had always measured strength in muscle and bone, in centuries of life, in resistance to pain. But this human boy had shown a different kind of strength. The strength to act when action seemed pointless. The strength to hope when hope was gone. The Sylvan philosophers wrote papers about the incident. They called it irrational compassion, the tendency of humans to make choices that defied logic. They studied human history and found pattern after pattern. Humans jumping into frozen rivers to save strangers. Humans running into burning buildings. Humans giving their lives for people they had never met. It made no sense to species who had evolved to calculate, to plan, to survive. But it made perfect sense to humans. At the academy, Kang Do-hwan tried to return to his old life. He went to class. He sat in seat 4-3A. He took notes in his small, neat handwriting. But everything was different now. People looked at him. People talked to him. People wanted to know him. He hated it at first. He'd spent 2 years building walls around himself, hiding from the memories, pretending to be invisible. Now those walls were gone, and he felt exposed and raw. Yoon-hana stayed by his side. She walked with him to classes. She sat with him at meals. She reminded him, again and again, that he did not have to carry this alone. "You have friends now," she said one morning as they watched the sunrise from the observation deck. "Real friends. People who care about you." "I do not know how to have friends," Do-hwan admitted. "I spent so long trying to disappear. Then learn," Hana said gently. "You taught yourself to walk into fire. You can teach yourself this too." On the 4th day after the ceremony, Tira found Do-hwan in the library. She sat down across from him without asking permission. Her silver eyes were serious. "My sister cannot stop talking about you," she said. "She has told everyone in our family about the human who saved her. They want to meet you." Do-hwan looked uncomfortable. "I do not need thanks. I did not do it for recognition." "I know," Tira said, "but she needs to get it. Saying thank you is important for Sylvans. It closes a circle. It brings peace." Do-hwan was quiet for a long moment. "All right," he finally said. "Tell her I would be honored." Tira smiled. It was the first time he had seen her smile. "There is something else. I would like to be your friend. Not because you are famous now, or because you saved my sister. Because I have watched you for 2 years, sitting alone in that corner, and I always wondered what your story was. Now I know, and I think you are someone worth knowing." Before Do-hwan could respond, Park Jun-ho appeared at the table. He dropped into the seat beside Tira with a grin on his face. "I hope I am not interrupting anything important," he said cheerfully. "I just came to tell our local hero that the ambassador's office has received 400 requests for interviews. My father wanted me to ask how you would like to handle them." "Tell them no," Do-hwan said immediately. "All 400? "All 400. Jun-ho laughed. "I told him you would say that. He said to tell you that you are terrible at politics, but excellent at being stubborn." On the 6th day, Ren came to him. Do-hwan was alone on the training deck, practicing hand-to-hand combat against a simulation drone. He heard footsteps behind him and turned. The Thulian stood at the entrance, his blue skin pale, his proud shoulders hunched. "I came to apologize," Ren said. His voice was stiff and awkward, like the words hurt him. "I said terrible things to you. I called you weak. I said humans did not deserve respect." He swallowed hard. "My grandparents were on Hollow Moon Keth 4. They are alive because of you. I am able to visit them this holiday because of you." Do-hwan turned off the drone. "You did not know. That is not an excuse. I judged you without knowing anything about you. I judged your entire species without knowing anything about humans. That was wrong." Ren straightened his back. He placed his right fist over his heart, the Thulian gesture of deepest respect. "You have more honor in your fragile human body than I have in my entire bloodline. I will spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of the debt my family owes you." Dawan looked at the Thulian for a long time. Then he nodded. "Apology accepted. And you owe me nothing. Your grandparents do not owe me anything. No one owes me anything. I did what I thought was right. That is all." Ren lowered his fist. "How do you do it?" he asked quietly. "How do you stay so humble when the entire galaxy is calling you a hero?" Dawan thought about the question. "Because I remember the fear," he finally said. "I remember lying on the floor of that reactor, feeling my body burn, thinking I was going to die alone in the dark. There was nothing heroic about that moment. There was only terror and pain, and the desperate hope that it would mean something." He picked up his training staff. "Heroes do not exist. There are only ordinary people who refuse to look away." On the 7th day, Dawan returned to seat 430. The lecture hall was full. Commander Voss stood at the front, ready to begin his lesson. Dawan walked down the aisle toward the back row, toward his corner, toward the place where he had been invisible for 2 years. But when he reached his seat, he stopped. Tira was sitting beside in seat 43B. She looked up at him with a small smile. "I hope you do not mind. The back row has better views." Before Dawan could answer, Junho appeared and took seat 43C. "She is right. I never noticed how nice it is back here. Very peaceful." Then more footsteps, more cadets, Sylvans and Kalari, and even a few Thulians filing into the back rows, filling the empty seats around 43A. They did not make a big show of it. They just sat down and opened their tablets, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Ren was the last to arrive. He stood at the edge of the row, looking uncertain. "Is there room?" he asked quietly. Dawan looked at the Thulian who had mocked him, who had doubted him, who had apologized with tears in his eyes. Then he gestured to the empty seat at the end of the row. "Sit down," he said. Commander Voss watched from the front of the room. A smile crossed his four-eyed face. "It seems the back row has become popular," he observed. "Shall we begin?" The lesson started. Commander Voss talked about battle formations and strategic retreats and acceptable losses. But in the back row, surrounded by aliens who had once ignored him, Kang Dawan was not alone anymore. Hannah found him after class. She looked at the crowd of cadets leaving with him, the Sylvan girl and the ambassador's son, and the proud Thulian walking beside the quiet human. "Look at you," she said softly. "Making friends." "I did not ask for this," Dawan said. But he was smiling, the first real smile in 2 years. "I know," Hannah said. "That is why it matters." That night, the Union Military Academy announced a new addition to their curriculum, a course called Human Behavioral Psychology, the Irrational Variables. It would study why humans ran toward danger instead of away from it. It would examine the strange fire that burned inside them, the refusal to accept what other species called inevitable. The course description ended with a simple statement. The galaxy has always measured strength in firepower, speed, and logic. But recent events have revealed a different metric. The stubbornness of a species too foolish to accept the math and too brave to care. This course will attempt to understand that stubbornness, and perhaps to learn from it. In his quarters, along with his thoughts, Dawan read those words on his tablet. He touched the medal on his desk, the star of valor that had dragged his secret into the light. He still did not feel like a hero. He still dreamed of fire and screaming children. He still woke up some nights unable to breathe, but he was not invisible anymore. He was not alone. And maybe, he thought, that was enough. Outside his window, the stars burned cold and eternal, watching over a galaxy that was slowly learning what it meant to be human.